just wrote a very jolly a poem about Juliet Roberts' hair in Pretty Woman. That needed to be out there.
Welcome to 3 Poems and a Question, an occasional interview series from the Poetic licence, hosted by me, Jo Bell. I asked subscribers who they'd like me to speak to, and several times now they've told me they'd like to hear from Kathryn Bevis. Your wish is my command. So I interviewed Kathryn, who is currently in residence at a little cottage in Clifford Chambers, owned by the Hosking Houses Trust, a charity that exists to give women over 40 some writing space. Details in the show notes. At my end, the sound quality was a bit echoey, and at Kathryn's there was a techno glitch which meant that 2 of the poems you'll hear will be read by me and not by Kathryn. But I still think this interview is very much worth listening to. Five or 6 years ago, perhaps around 2019, a new name began to crop up in poetry prize lists and journals, and since then it's been in orbit around the UK poetry firmament, in journals like the Poetry Review, Poetry Wales, the London Magazine, Wasafiri and the Interpreter's House. It's been seen on prize lists like the National Poetry Competition Longlist, Poets and Players, the Mislexia Pamphlet Competition and the Forward Prizes shortlist. And that name is Kathryn Bevis. Hello, madam. Nice hat.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to be here with you. I've been watching these 3 poems and a question and just enjoying them so much. So it's a real honour to be here.
Kathryn is a poetry teacher and guide, founder of the Writing School Online, which has been a great friend to the Poetic Licence. And in 2022, her short collection Flamingo came out with Seren, and it had an immediate impact. Everyone who read it remembers it. Emma Storr in London Grip said, "I don't think I've ever reviewed such a stunning and original pamphlet as Flamingo." Vicky Morris says it bops and shimmies with beauty, which it does, and it was named as one of the Poetry Society's Books of the Year. That poetry is humane, honest, playful, it's joyful and it's mischievous. There are experiments with form, and titles like Wonder Woman questions her status as a 70s symbol of female empowerment. And Kathryn talks in one interview about aiming for clarity and restraint. Those 2 qualities particularly shine out from the poems about the breast cancer that was diagnosed in 2022. Poems like My Body Tells Me She's Filing for Divorce, or My Cancer as a Ring-Tailed Lemur. These poems are surprising because they see the disease not as an enemy, but as a fellow creature occupying the same threatened habitat. Kathryn pays the same close attention to its progress as she might to domestic love or the behaviour of birds. It's an object lesson in poetry and in emotional resilience. These are poems which for decades to come are going to help anyone facing a critical illness and their loved ones as they find their way on that treacherous path that so many of us have to tread. It is, needless to say, an enormous pleasure to welcome you, Kathryn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for a lovely introduction as well.
We ought to start, please, with a poem. What poem are you going to start with?
So I thought I would start with My Cancer as a Ring-Tailed Lemur. I think it's probably the one of the best poems that I've written. My cancer as a ring-tailed lemur. We both know one day she'll eat me, but for now we dance a little game of catch me if you can. Tracking her is difficult, but specialists are interested, and bit by bit they creep inside my body's forest, stalk her with their fancy cameras, take images, write reports. On ultrasound, she's punk rock stripes of white and black. On mammograms, she sunbathes, downy as a dandelion gone to seed. The child I am divines the time by blowing 5 years, 10 years, 20, more. That's when they spy her, up in the canopy, her tail Rapunzel's plait, looped, round a single sentinel node. Now, on MRI, they spot her kindly spaniel's face, crammed into the lettuce of my breast. At last, on PET CT, they catch her on the move. She's up and off all right. A lope, a leap. She careens through my branches, omnivorous for bone and liver, brain. Because her nature is to double herself again, she and her sisters huddle, tails conjoined, tiny arms about each other's necks. The child I am learns to prophesy afresh, blows 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5. Friends say, this is war, and I'm a warrior, a tower of strength. But the lemur and I get on okay. I figure she has a right to be here. She is, in some important sense, endangered too. I draw the line at poisoning, but let the hunters starve her most days. She looks at me with orange eyes of ire as we witness our habitat's destruction. My new need for naps, my breathlessness, for both of us, a forest fire.
You have one collection called Flamingo and one coming up called The Butterfly House. So nature and the animal world are real central concerns. Tell us about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think for Flamingo, I was starting to move into, thank you, beautifully modelled. I've been starting to find of ways to write about inhabiting with cancer, and I was getting really fed up. I know it's really helpful to a lot of people, so I don't want to take anything away from them to think about their disease process in this way. But I was hearing a lot of language around battle and war and fighting and kicking ass, cancer's ass. I can see it's a really horrible disease, such a common one, and choosing a battle metaphor might be really, really empowering for people, but it just wasn't for me. Always left me cold, and made me want to write about the disease, as you said, as a kind of process of cohabitation within my body in the same vessel and this same home. Both of us want to exist. Both of us desperate to want to survive this, and that drive that we have for life, that drive for existence, is identical in both of us. And also I think cancer, not in a massively welcome way, has made itself from me. So what I've wanted to do, I suppose, is identify with it, which is a weird step to take. I get that. People want to dissociate and see it as an enemy and fight it, as I've said. But I think for me, it's been really crucial to understand my disease process, reaction, the kind of compassion, I suppose, I have for my body in this experience. And so it's almost like reverse anthropomorphism. I'm not interested in what ways animals are like me. It's the other. It's in what way are my natural processes, my life, my values, if you like, and my drives. It's about how much I am like them. That's the reverse there.
So many of the achievements that you've had in these past 5 astonishing years have been linked to prizes and competitions. And we know, of course, that that's only one kind of success, as I often say. But that big array of prize lists tells me 2 things. First, that a really wide range of judges and editors recognise your voice and your skill, even when it's anonymously submitted. But secondly, that you find prizes a useful measurement or mechanism in some way. And I want to know why that is.
That's such a great question, and it's changing all the time. So I think when I was first writing in 2018, 2019, I was too scared to send my work off to be peer reviewed with my name attached. That was all it was, fear. And yet I wanted to connect with this community of peers, of poets who I respect. So if I saw a poetry competition and I had enough cash on me, and it had a judge that I really valued, then I would go for it.
Kathryn only started writing poetry in 2018. The following year, in a move which will inspire some of you and dishearten others, she entered the Mislexia Single Poem Competition.
I got longlisted to 100 and I was like, oh my God. And it's just been a journey. It's ever since about learning and about thinking and writing and, making spectacular cock-ups with early drafts, and then taking lots of mentoring, as you know, and that was actually the most precious kind of validation ever since, because it was the first time someone who I rate, and it was Carol and Duffy that year, said, yes, you've got something here. And that's carried on, I suppose, then, because it went well. I'm like, oh, feels quite nice. And a few quid never goes amiss, does it?
We all think we're a fraud, don't we? And that somebody who is judging that competition says, not a fraud, you may pass.
Yeah. That's right. I think that sense that you're recognised as part of a conversation. There's a lot of pageantry and jamboree around competition success. That absolutely wasn't what I was going for. And when I do apply for things now, I tend to go more for good journals, magazines, online publications, because I value that conversation. Who's sitting are you next to?
Yeah.
In a journal is lovely, who's behind you, have they arranged the poems as conversations between the
and you say in the acknowledgements of Flamingo that all of the poems are in conversation with other poets or poems, and I think that's something that we often overlook. We think our poems are in splendid isolation, and they never can be or should be.
I'm so conscious that they're not, and I don't want them to be. And I've listed kind of at the beginning of Flamingo, and I will again when the Butterfly House, my debut full collection, will come out quite soon with Seren. I want to acknowledge those voices, those poets who I'm close to. It might be because in some ways a poem that I'm writing might be borrowing an act of technique, or a way of thinking, or a way of looking, or not actual phrasing, obviously, but just a kind of framework.
You saw the Helen Mort interview where she fesses up that she accidentally stole a line of Don Patterson's.
I did. I thought that was so great. And how that's such huge admiration, isn't it? When you want to take something inside of you and it to be yours so much that you could let that go through all your edits and copy edits, and then much later go, oh, hang on, and I think, I think that it really made me smile too.
It's the sincerest form of flattery, isn't it?
Amazing. I'm sure Don would be delighted. It's all about reading, and I think Rita Dove talks about it, enjoying the work of reading, and then the poems will come. And for me, that's the job, really, is just to read the good stuff. You can't be friends with every poem, or every poet's work, and that's okay. Just keep reading, and but actually reading widely as well, in translation, and reading older poetry. There's nothing new under the sun. Like, if you thought to just do this really snazzy thing, you can bet someone in China 500 years was doing it, before you. So it's fun to just browse other people's bookshelves as well, and try and just let yourself kind of immerse into this lovely bath of poetry, and see what wants to live inside you. reading a poem that has a lot of magic in it, and actually that you're trying to write about your grandparents' wedding suddenly turns into this vaudeville, and you've got this amazing, you've got this incredible magic show going on behind the kind of bare facts of your parents' marriage. Yeah, I love that kind of serendipities.
And you tap into that. There's this immense vivacity and colour in your poems, but there's also a little bit of a circus element, isn't there? There's the potential for threat or for the unexpected happening wherever there are animals, wherever there are birds, wherever there's nature.
Yeah, and I like shifting shape a lot as well. You'll have noticed from Flamingo, and you will see more in the Butterfly House that actually those forms of shape shifting, stepping into another's short shoes or wings or talons, a murmuration of starling.
Oh, the Starling poem, in which also you're very playful with text on the page, but not for its own sake. It's not just art wank. You are using the white space in a way that bolsters up the subject. It's brilliant.
I remember it was the summer, and I don't know, I think I'd moved in with my partner, and he said, just take the summer off. Don't worry about work. Like, what a gift is that from someone? So I had a couple of months, and I remember that was one of the poems that came out of that kind of undisturbed time.
The second poem Kathryn asked me to read is her Playing Tigers. It's morning. We paint on our big cat faces, a ground of white with blackened lines touched by the orange of savannah dust. In this mood, chubby cub, you want to ride on my back. We're off, scent marking our territory. The beige wall-to-wall carpet, the Laura Ashley three-piece suite. You grab at my clothes, my hair, my cheeks. By lunchtime, your sulk is all sun, an inferno from a cloudless sky. Later, we slink quietly through the grass of afternoon, play patter cake with soft paws. I read to you on the sofa from the house at Pooh Corner. You're dopey now, strokeable, wrapping your body's striped rug around my lap. Fast forward 30-odd years. You're nursing on an oncology unit, and I'm here, straight to stage 4. What we both know about survival is hard won. Be a tiger, you used to say, then pause. Sis, I remember your tiny finger held high, mid-air, to ward off the unthinkable. But not a real one.
It's a very small poem and a very simple conceit, and I wanted to bring it along to talk about restraint, really, at the level of language, and how important it can be, and how an enormous emotional connection can be generated just with that kind of passed down language. That's what I was aiming for, anyway.
It's 3 poems and a question, so we had our question. Can you tell us what those things are that have helped you to flourish as a poet? What are the standout books or people or moments that have brought you to this stage of your poetic life?
Yeah, great question. So I think a few things stand out, and one of them has to do with you, Joe. We did some mentoring probably back in 2020. I think it was the beginning of the pandemic. We're both, you on your houseboat, and I was sitting in my sitting room thinking, great, what now? But I've been really careful to work with and to seek out mentor relationships with different poets. And I think quite early on, I sought you out at Verve. You gave me some advice. You said you're 80% there with craft. Just keep reading, and that's going to come. Keep writing. But you said you're playing it safe. Why are you trying to write about beautiful things? Why are you trying to write about positive things? Why are you painting a picture, a pretty picture for me? And I think that really changed everything. I think other people had been trying to give me that advice, but you were really direct about it, and you got through. And I thought, God, yeah, why am I trying to? This isn't, life modeling 101. I'm not trying to create, and I'm sure you could do something really interesting and dark and disturbing like life modeling as well. But I'm not trying to just paint something beautiful anymore. And I think you really gave me permission to just open the vault and say, there's a lot of stuff here in this life here. Some of it involves relationships have become abusive, or writing about my school bully, but doing that in a compassionate way. There are poems in Flamingo about teaching, which was the most incredible thing to do as a job, and also the very worst. The teaching bit was absolutely phenomenal. Everything else for me was awful, and I was undiagnosed autistic at that stage as well. So there was a lot, actually. I was a bit lost. I didn't totally understand myself, and poetry and working with poet mentors has helped me get some of that stuff, I suppose, out. And I'm not talking about poetry as a form of therapy, but that is a lovely side effect. That if you're, I think Caroline Bird is always fond of quoting Louise Gluck about this, that writing about adverse circumstances in your life, about trauma, transformative. You've bested it. If you've been able to make a piece of art from it that sings by itself. Goodness, what revenge? She calls it revenge over circumstance, which I like. That's one part of it. I think I've had a really wonderful, long, fruitful, and really beautiful friendship and mentorship with Jonathan Edwards, and his legacy is written large around through the both collections. He loves writing about animals, so that's handy. He likes writing about family, and in my new collection I have a whole kind of section really almost dedicated to my Nanan, my Yorkshire Nanan. She was interesting to write about. She's not a kind of Werther original grandma. She's a proper, like, she used to run the canteen at Sheffield Steel. She was formidable and brilliant, and I loved her. And she just was this whole 3D person, and writing about her has brought me closer to her after kind of a rift after divorce, my parents' divorce. So it was wonderful to connect with her again. So you, Jonathan, I'm trying to think. Do you remember that Verve I met you at? I must have done 5 workshops that day, and I've changed that now. I probably have half and half kind of readings and workshops, but I've spanked the workshops. I love them.
Yeah, I think it's a way that I think I began in the same way. I discovered poetry, and I had this evangelistic zeal that I wanted to throw myself into all possible opportunities. As you evolve, perhaps you need different kinds of input. So sometimes it might be a blast of workshops. Sometimes you just want to sit quietly in a room and read all the poetry that's ever been written. Sometimes one conversation with one person can move things along a bit. And I remember that in that conversation with you, I think I said, go to where it hurts, because that's where the good stuff is.
The gold, you said, and then you said, "Don't send me the therapist bill." I remember it very well.
Well, I didn't know, neither did you, what we were going to apply that to. And I think that's what we're all doing. We're just building up the skill set so that when we know what we want to write about, you can tackle it. You can get down to work with it. I've never managed the trick of being able to write and to have a relationship at the same time, but you seem to have nailed that.
I got very lucky with Ollie. I think when we first met in 2014, I wasn't a writer. I was a reader, and I still am. But so he was used to me like locking myself away and reading for hours, for days. Yeah, we've had conversations along the way. It's important to get that right in a partnership about to be able to say this is work. We have this kind of code in our house. We say, I'm shutting the door now. But just as serious as his work is my work. So that's respected, and it took some conversations for us both really to work through what was happening, whether this was a hobby, this was something that I wanted to teach, and therefore it became a business. But then how did the creative practice? How would the creative practice sit alongside that and still be respected as work? So yeah, they're not easy conversations, but they're absolutely crucial.
I'm going to draw us to a close in a moment. I think we have space here for poem number 3.
Yeah. Beautiful, and it is about grief, but actually what it speaks to is really, really important, is about restraint, which we skirt about, but it's so important to me to write in plain language, in kind of Anglo-Saxon kennings are very important to me, and using a register that feels restrained rather than difficult. I don't want to be I don't want my language to be a barrier.
The Thing Is, by Ellen Bass. The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you, like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms. A plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes. And you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again.
That twin thing of restraint and clarity is absolutely key to not only the massive subjects like cancer, but to everything. In fact, perhaps the more trivial the subject, the better it is with restraint and clarity.
And then it means you can change your mind as well, and just throw in one polysyllabic Latinate word. God, that's going to really, fry your heads, your readers' heads, and that's a wonderful thing. Breaking pattern is a wonderful thing, and you see this in the really, really great poets, that they will throw out a word like oracular or mysterious. Or there's a wonderful book called The Virtues of Poetry. And he waxes lyrical for a whole chapter on that about register, and I've learned a lot from that. Writing stinks; it's really awful. but editing, give me a poem to edit, especially one of my own. I'm on it. I can sort that one out. I think because of my autism, I've always been an incredibly direct communicator. There's been a real, silver lining of the neurodivergency. I think I shared with this tip with you about ages ago about just going in there editing for one thing. I love it when I do that. When I'm just looking at verb choice, I'm a pig in clover. I love it. There's a charity I really, really want to support, Victoria's Promise, and it's beautiful. It's for women 50 and younger when they first present, and it takes people from stage 0 to 4.
There's a link to Victoria's Promise in the show notes if you want to make a donation. And there's also a link to pre-order The Butterfly House, coming out later this year, from Seren. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it got a record number of pre-orders? Just saying.
Thank you very much for giving us this time.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Aww. Writing stinks. It's really awful.